Hey everybody, Mike Miller with the Herald-Times, columnist Jeremy Price, coming to you from Bankers Life Fieldhouse in Indianapolis, Big Ten tournament time, and
we're enjoying the hospitality room while we're here, because we're not going to be here long.
We're not coming back. Once again, another disappointing, quick run at the Big Ten tournament for Indiana, losing 72-69 on Cameron Chapman's buzzer-beating three-pointer. Just what happened? I don't know.
What happened is the Big Ten tournament happened.
This
is pretty much par for the course.
Usually what happens.
Cam Chapman, Luke Recker, Blake Hoffarber. All names Hoosier fans know and love.
There's a long line of these kinds of games, these kinds of defeats at this time of year, especially when you get to this Big Ten tournament. We came into this weekend almost wondering what the edge would be for Indiana coming off a regular season title. This is kind of more or less a cherry on top. I mean, granted, they could both possibly improve their NCAA tournament seeding and possibly hurt it too, which we may see over these next couple days. But that was kind of one of the big questions coming into this tournament for Indiana. What was their edge? And I don't think that was a very sharp edge today.
Yeah, and you knew it would probably take a little time to get into this game. It typically does. And I think the team coming in that's already played a game like Michigan has an advantage. But I thought Indiana overcame that part of things relatively quickly, especially when you consider what happened in Ann Arbor when Michigan jumped up 15-4 and Indiana bounced back. So this time, much less of a deficit. Indiana got back even much quicker. But what Indiana couldn't ever do was create any kind of separation today.
We saw some old problems for Indiana, namely some defensive miscues on rotations, losing guys. There were turnovers, yet again. Indiana largely done a good job these last couple weeks of putting a cap on some of these turnovers before they got out of control, and then there was really a lack of their bread and butter, their three-point shooting. Only had, 4 today, 4 for 17 from beyond the arc. So a list of problems, and granted, despite some of these issues, they were right there until these very last seconds.
Yeah, it's sort of a good news, bad news situation, as well as Michigan played for the most part, although they didn't shoot the three all that well either, with the exception of the final minute.
Yeah.
But overall, I thought Michigan played probably about as well as you could hope for if you're a Michigan fan, and yet Indiana was still able to keep kind of bouncing back, and got that lead up to 5, had a chance to get it to 6, but for the Troy Williams missed free throw with, 2.5 minutes to go. And you thought Indiana was in control, just like you thought early in the second half. Indiana surged to a 5-point lead, and you thought they were about to take control. But they just could not shut the door today, and maybe that was just sort of emblematic of lacking that edge, like you say. We saw fits and starts, we saw spurts of the really good Indiana, and then we saw the problematic Indiana that we saw back in November and December.
18 lead changes today, and like you said, never really locked in on that defensive end. That's really been part of the revelation for this team, that defensive edge, that defensive intensity, and never saw it sustained. I think we saw it at times. I go back maybe midway through that first period. There was a block by OG Anunoby, and moments later, Troy Williams dives on the court for kind of a 50-50 ball, ties it up, forces a tie up there. That got everyone excited. That got the crowd into it. That got the bench into it. That got Yogi Ferrell was into it. Everyone was feeling it, but they just couldn't sustain that throughout the day. And I thought at times that was partially why maybe we didn't see Indiana as successful or even getting into transition like they usually do.
And that kind of goes to what we talked about. It seems like Indiana would finally get stops, and then they'd go down and turn the ball over. Or Indiana would finally find some rhythm offensively, and then they couldn't get stops. That they just never got all the facets of the game in sync today.
You wonder now where this team goes, because we'll find out Sunday evening, but as we said earlier, probably hurt themselves a little bit here today, probably looking at a 3 seed coming into the day, possibly in Des Moines, a relatively close destination to Bloomington.
As destination options go this year.
Yeah. Now it's all kind of up in the air. I have a hard time believing they'll follow as a 3.
I would think they would slip to a 4. Probably. Most projections had them the last or next to last 3 seed, so you would think that more than likely they're going to slip down a line. And you had a lot of people still in play for those positions in other tournaments, Big 12, SEC, ACC. So depending on how that plays out, and just even here in the Big 10, Purdue wins today. They're in the semifinals. They knock off Michigan. They reach the finals. Maybe Purdue and Indiana sort of swap places. Purdue jumps up to the 3. Indiana slides to the 4. What that does to going to Des Moines, maybe it has an impact. Maybe it doesn't. I don't know. Guess we'll find out.
We will find out soon enough. We'll also find out just how healthy this Indiana team will be moving forward. Good news and bad news today.
Yeah.
Early on, definitely some good news. Juwan Morgan played, first of all. As you mentioned, limited. He was definitely limited today. Robert Johnson dressed, warmed up, and quite frankly looked okay moving around before the game in the layup lines, doing some of the drills to warm up and just kind of get loose. He was moving fine, it seemed, but obviously he did not have any sort of brace or wrap on his left ankle, so he did not go today, although he will be almost a month removed from that original ankle sprain when Indiana eventually gets into the NCAA tournament this week. So things are looking up, it seems, with Robert Johnson. However, another injury to monitor coming out of Indianapolis. Colin Hartman took a big spill in this one. Landed, I think, on his right arm. I think it might have been his forearm. Either way, he was hurting. He was hurting throughout the game. He was hurting at the end of it. I noticed going through the post-game handshake line. Was kind of shielding himself and kind of doing the left hand to give guys some whatever. And locker room post game, sitting there, just kind of hanging the arm a little bit. Didn't look too comfortable. I asked him about it. Says he's fine, just a little sore, and told.
He says he's fine. He tells Tim Garl he's fine. He tells us he's fine. I guess he must be fine.
He's fine. But just in case he's not, that might be why he may be somewhat limited going into this tournament. We'll see how that plays out. Certainly, 5 days, 5 or so days.
Well, that's the thing. If there's another silver lining to this, it's the fact that now Indiana has all the more time to get healthy. It doesn't have to run Juwan Morgan out there and risk another shoulder popping out this weekend. It doesn't have to try and get Robert Johnson back out there. He can go ahead and take those next few days, get fully healthy, because while he looked fine in warm-ups, he also wasn't going full speed on anything. He wasn't elevating fully on the jump shot. And of course he wasn't wearing an ankle brace, so that was sort of telling in and of itself, because if he was actually going to play or go full speed, he'd probably be doing that. So, but now there's anywhere from 6 days to a full week before Indiana plays again. So you've got all that time to get these bodies as healthy as possible, and frankly, Indiana could be as much at full strength next week as it's been at any time in the last month of the season.
Yeah, that's a good point. I thought one of the beautiful things of coming up here to the Big Ten tournament is the fact that we get open locker rooms, we get to see these guys just kind of mingle about after the games, and just kind of taking the temperature of the locker room after the game. Obviously disappointed. Anyone would be disappointed if it was that way, especially to that team. But I got the sense that Indiana is confident. I don't think this was too big of a dagger. I don't think this is maybe too... I mean, clearly, it definitely stops the momentum that they had. You probably want to get through your opening game of the tournament.
Yes.
Either way. But I kind of got the sense that guys, at the very least, were able to lean on some of these the rough patches they had in November, December, some of the losses they had on the road in January, going up to Wisconsin. This program's obviously been kind of in this position before. They've had to pick themselves off the mat, and I get the sense that there's more confidence than there is really just an overwhelming sense of dread right now.
And I guess the thing is that it's not just that, but these guys look at this game and they see the mistakes they made, and they know where they let it get away. They don't need to go look at the film. They don't need to go talk about it. They know the mistakes they made in terms of turnovers, in terms of defensive rotation, all those things that let this game get away. And it was sort of a ready acknowledgement of that in the post-game locker room. And Max Bielfeldt was asked if this was sort of a wake-up call, like maybe like a Duke or like a Penn State or something like that. And he was kind of like, well, I mean, you can look at it that way, but it's not really that. We kind of know what we did wrong or whatever. This just sort of is a re-emphasis of that. And I think the biggest thing is this team's got to get back to having that edge that we've talked about was missing today. Sort of that something to prove attitude that they've carried with them most of this season. I didn't get a sense of that today. As they wanted to win, but there wasn't a sense of having something to prove really coming in here as Big Ten outright champions and playing a Michigan team that they annihilated so easily. I mean, as much as you say you put that in the back of your mind, it's still there, and I think it's difficult to put aside. I think they probably felt like, oh, well, sooner or later we're going to put together a run that'll get rid of these guys. They just never could.
So now it's back to Bloomington, back to final examination of these mistakes. Can't make these mistakes again. The margin for error obviously gets a lot thinner for Indiana and the rest of the nation. But you do look at this as a veteran team, kind of cognizant very quickly of what went wrong, and you wonder just how quickly I think there is a little bit more confidence that they can turn it around and fix it quickly, and obviously they'll have, 5 or so days to actually do that before they take the floor again. So we're going to follow them home. We're heading back to Wellington ourselves, and from there we will potentially be at Assembly Hall Sunday evening once Indiana has its first round NCAA tournament opponent and destination in cement. Once that's all known, we'll check in from there. So
selection show 5:30 Sunday night.
2 whole hours this year, baby.
Woohoo!
Yeah, can't wait for that. All right, guys. See you.
See you next week.